welcome to episode 23 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast to help you go vegan. Every 2 weeks, I'll share a new episode discussing all things vegan. Most importantly, we'll talk about how to embrace this meaningful decision with fervor and fun. Episodes post every other Monday on your favorite podcast app. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Today, I am joined by Anthony Masiello, co-founder and CEO of Plant-Based TeleHealth, a national lifestyle telemedicine service focused on the prevention and reversal of disease with lifestyle medicine and whole food plant-based nutrition. Anthony first came to a plant-based lifestyle himself after being denied a 20-year life insurance policy at 33. He was morbidly obese, weighing more than 360 pounds, medicated for high blood pressure, and suffering from psoriasis, eczema, migraine headaches, and sleep apnea. In this episode, you will hear his amazing story, transformation, and what brought him to creating a HIPAA-compliant platform allowing anyone in the U.S. access to lifestyle medicine. I've heard Anthony's story a few times in person and am always inspired, so it was great to have the opportunity to sit down with him one-on-one. Hey, Anthony. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like this is going to be a great conversation. My listeners are going to be super interested because you have a pretty compelling story, and now you're working on something really cool. Why don't we get started with hearing about how you started on this plant-based journey?
Okay, it's kind of a long story, but I think we'll chop it up into pieces. I'll start. I always think, like, how far back did we go? I guess we go all the way back, right?
Why not?
Because I do think it's useful to share, kind of a little bit about how I grew up, because I think it reflects on where I came from. But the point is, I was basically overweight for my whole life, for as long as I can remember, anyway. I do know that somehow I gained weight. I think it was over the summer between the 4th and 5th grades, because I spent the summers at my dad's in New Jersey, and then I went home to North Carolina for the school years. And when I left and then came back, and my school friends asked me, they're like, "Wow, Anthony, how did you get so fat over the summer?" And I was like, "I didn't know." And truthfully, if I would have been there, I don't think anyone else would have really known either, because I probably gained the weight gradually over 3 months or something like that. And I wasn't morbidly obese. I didn't go from being thin to obese at that point, but I gained some weight, and I guess it was noticeable. So a few friends, but and it was in the 80s, and it was a little bit less common, maybe than it is today. So it was a thing, and it kind of became how I identified myself and kind of how other people identified me. Also, I was always tall, even in school and stuff. And now I'm 6'4". So it was easy, like being tall and being, whatever you want to call it, husky or overweight or anything back then. It was noticeable and recognizable, and I was the big guy. Then if we fast forward, that's kind of been my story. I identified as being the big guy or Big Anthony. And then in October of 2005, so if we fast forward, we were talking earlier, I guess that would have probably been like 83 or 84 is what 1983 or 84 is what I was talking when I had gained that weight, and my school friends were noticing. So now by 2005, I had graduated college. I was married. My wife and I had bought a home a few years earlier. We had one child, and she was pregnant with our second child. And I went to apply for a life insurance policy to actually have it increased. I got one when we had our first child, and we just wanted to have more life insurance with the second. And when I went for Evan, who's my oldest, he was they put me into a high risk category, which really just meant I had to pay a little extra for my policy. And then when I went for Henry, I was flat denied. I was denied a 20-year term life insurance policy. That kind of hit me pretty hard, because my work, my background and my education is in computer science, and then I worked in informatics and analytics. And I know how these insurance companies are making their decisions, and it's not based on who they want to insure or not. It's they plug in all of your medical records, they do a physical, they plug in all your data, and it spits out. And for me, it said bad bet. Or if I really want to take it as hard as possible, it said that they didn't expect me to live for 20 years, that this policy was probably going to have to be paid out. It was a 20-year term life insurance policy. And they said, don't do it, So I was only 33 years old and I was just starting a family. So that's not really what I wanted to hear. So it kind of scared me. And for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reason was, I didn't blame the insurance company. I blamed myself. And I think that's an important distinction, because any other mood I would have been in, or what I see tons of other people do now, is as soon as they hear the news they don't like, they blame something that's out of their control. And when you do that, you can't do anything about it, right? But what I did was I blamed myself. And that meant that I could do something about it. If it was my fault that I got into that situation, then it's, I'm empowered to get myself out of the situation. And a lot of this kind of came to me reflecting over the years and figuring out, like, how was I able to do it this time and not, the hundreds of times I tried, through middle school and high school and college and after college, and why was I able to do it? But that was a big factor. So I did want to mention that, because I think it's important. So I was motivated to change. I knew I needed to do something differently, but I didn't know what to do. The last time I had successful losing weight for a short period of time, I went vegetarian. So I was still vegetarian. Oh, I guess I should say why I was denied. I think I glossed over that part. So they denied me because at the time I was 360 pounds. I had a 54-inch waist. I was already on medication for high blood pressure. I kept telling my doctor I did not want to go on medication for my high cholesterol, because it wasn't so high that the doctor was insisting, but they were saying, I needed to either lower it or start going on medication. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. I had eczema on my fingers. I had psoriasis on the back of my neck. Yeah, and I was getting migraine headaches regularly that couldn't be controlled. So I think with all of those risk factors, which would then include at the time, BMI and weight and all of that. I think my BMI was 45 or 46, which is pretty high up there on that chart. They just didn't think that I was insurable.
So tough news at 33 with 2 little kids.
Yeah, well, one on the way. He wasn't even born yet. I was like, wow. Yeah, that was scary. Yeah, you're right. So I didn't know what to do. I was vegetarian, and whenever I searched for anything to lose weight, I, all that was coming up was these high protein, or at the time it was just called Atkins, right? It was this was in 2005. So there was still that kind of mindset going on, but I didn't want to start eating meat. I was already proud of being a vegetarian, and I had success with it. And I knew that fruits and vegetables were healthy, and I didn't want to, try to go back to eating meat. I did eat dairy. I didn't understand the dairy industry, and I didn't understand what the dairy was doing to my health personally at the time. So anyway, I was searching the internet for vegetarian weight loss. That's all I knew what to do. I went to Google. I searched for, if all the weight loss stuff I'm finding is basically high protein, high meat based is what it's really high meat based diets. I don't even like to use the word protein when I'm talking about food, because it's very confusing. But so I searched for vegetarian weight loss, and Dr. Furman's book popped up. His book, Eat to Live. And on the front cover of that edition, it was an earlier edition. On the front cover, it says fast and sustained weight loss. It's in like this blue splash.
Yep.
And then I said, oh, well, that sounds pretty cool. Like, that's kind of what I want.
Yeah.
But and this was on Amazon. So then I scrolled down and I was reading the reviews. And it was interesting to me because no one was talking about weight loss in the reviews. Everyone was talking about getting healthy. And I had another one of those moments, and I said, you know what? I don't even really want to lose weight. What I really want is I want to be healthy. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was a difference. So I said, well, this sounds good. He's saying fast and sustain weight loss. Everyone else is saying get healthy. So I bought
Yeah.
the book. So I clicked add to my cart, or one click buy, or whatever it was at the time. And I got the book and I started reading it, and I started doing what it said immediately. Every day. And it wasn't all correct from the beginning, but as I continued reading, I continued learning and getting better and understanding what I should and shouldn't be eating and how that would affect my body. But even though I didn't have it perfect in the beginning, I ended up losing, I think, 35 pounds in the first 2 months. So
Wow.
in the 2 months, by the time actually Henry was born, so even before he was born, I was already down 35 pounds in 2 months. And I was like, wow, this really works. And that was, that was my kind of rapid weight loss period. It did not continue at 17 pounds or whatever that is per month, going forward. But it did continue. I kept reading the book. I probably read the book 3 or 4 times. I didn't have social media. There wasn't a lot of information out on the internet that I could find. Dr. Furman did have his website, and he did have success stories on his website. So I did go read those, and I actually found those very motivating, to see that other people had done this and that they had gotten good results. So I did that. I just continued to improve, eating what's now we call a whole food plant-based diet, which just means, it's completely vegan. So I'm not eating any meat or dairy products at all, no animal products at all, and very little to no processed food at all, so even things like, flours and stuff, really just eating fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and seeds, and not very many on the nuts and seeds, but those fruits, vegetables, and beans is the majority of what I'm eating, or what I was eating then, and what I'm still eating now. But and I lost, after that first 2 months, I continued to lose about 8 pounds every single month. And that continued for a total of about 20 months.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, and then my weight loss stopped, and it stopped just as suddenly as it started. It started up just like that, and then it stopped. And by the time it stopped, I had lost a total of 160 pounds. Even before I lost all the weight, my doctor took me off my blood pressure medication. The sleep apnea had, disappeared. My fingers, the eczema on my hands cleared up. The psoriasis on my neck cleared up. I just started realizing I wasn't having headaches anymore. I had tons of energy. I was feeling great. So there was no reason to ever, to change or to wonder, if this is actually right for me, because all the signs were pointing towards everything is working perfectly. I guess that's the somewhat mixed length version. I mean, it speeds through the hard part, which is, changing was a lot of work. But I was so motivated, especially after losing some, seeing some success in the beginning. And I was also so committed and so determined to figure out how to make it work, that I was not looking for any kind of excuses. I wasn't looking for any kind of reasons on why this wasn't going to work. I just had to make it happen. And I'm super happy and excited that I did.
Yeah. Did you have moments where it was really hard and you thought, maybe I can't keep this up?
I really don't think I did. And I think it's just because I was reading the book and doing what it said. And what the take-home message for me was eat more vegetables and eat more fruits and eat less of everything else. Right.
Okay.
So I didn't on day one say, oh, I'm not going to have pizza. And then find out, oh, I'm in this situation and I'm really tempted and I'm going to have some pizza, right? I didn't have a hard line on pizza. What I had a hard line on is eat more vegetables and eat more fruits. So even if I was somewhere that had pizza, like I was eating the salad, and I would only eat the pizza anyway if it didn't have cheese on it, because I did have a hard line for, any kind of meats or meat and dairy and stuff. So because I was so focused on what I was going to eat more of, I don't really think I had those kind of feelings of, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this, because we can all eat more,
Right.
like eat more fruits and vegetables means as soon as we're done with this interview, I can go have an apple, And that's eating more fruit, right?
That's right.
Or tomorrow morning when I wake up, if I'm hungry, I'm not trying to starve myself. I'm not trying to not eat. I'm just thinking, oh, what can I eat? Oh, well, I would go to work and there was a buffet and they had chopped fruit. They had pineapple and melons, and sometimes they had strawberries and blueberries. And I kind of got my money's worth on those days because I would really fill up my container with berries and stuff. But even if it was pineapple or anything else, I can always eat more fruit, eat more vegetables. So I think that was a something that was different for me that time than all other times when I tried to lose weight or change my diet. And it made it much, I don't want to say easier, because it wasn't really, it's never really easy, but it made it to where I didn't have that much conflict with, as far as could I or couldn't I do this, or how was I going to be able to do this?
Yeah, that makes sense, right? It's when we go into that idea that, oh, I have to lose weight, there's already that word is a negative.
Yeah.
We're trying to get rid of something, and then we have to stop eating this. We can't have that. That language is so important. So it does make sense that if you always were focused on, I need more of, then it kind of crowds out all that stuff. And then, I mean, fruits and vegetables are magical. So you feel better, and then you don't want that stuff anyway.
Exactly. And especially when I was watching the scale. I mean, I think I was weighing myself 3 times a day. Not, just because not, and I was never stressed out by the scale, and I would really hesitate to recommend that someone else weigh themselves 3 times a day. But I was just looking at it like it was information, and I just learned these little things about myself. But I learned that when I go to sleep at night, but from the time I go to sleep at night to the time I wake up in the morning, I could lose 5 pounds overnight when I sleep. Like, that really helped me, as a big person, at someone 6'4" and 350 plus pounds, 360 pounds, just knowing that 5 pounds can change, in overnight. Right. Yeah. And that's probably really going to the bathroom in the morning. And then I think it's the vapor that we inhale and exhale, or that we exhale, in our breath while we're sleeping. And, maybe, I don't know, sweat or something. I don't know where it goes.
Right.
But just knowing that, like, that took away a lot of the power like, that didn't make me stress out by variations in the scale, because of whatever the scale said. I know, hey, if I go sleep for 8 hours, 4 or 5 pounds of that are going to be gone,
right.
So, but it was super helpful to watch it, and just to always see that, in general, even with those fluctuations, that it was just generally coming down. And, by the time I would get to the end of the month, sure enough, it would be like another 8 pounds down, and that worked almost like a clock. So I wouldn't say I was necessarily 2 pounds every week, but I was averaging out to 8 pounds a month, every single month. Okay. And that was fun to see. That was fun to witness, right, and watch. And that was motivating. And if I was halfway through the month and I had not lost any weight, I would be like, maybe I should eat more vegetables. Maybe I should eat more fruit, and exactly what you said. Let that crowd out anything else that I was thinking about, because I was so enjoying, I guess, that rate of progress.
And if you're looking at it like data too, so coming from your background, it's probably easy to put that in, that like, this is data, and it's going to help me understand what I'm doing, and is it helping me get to my goal? And then it also separates that emotion, because so much of our culture puts us in this idea that if you are in a certain weight, male or female, you can, if you are a certain weight, your value is less or different than. And when people internalize that and then they get on the scale, it can really hurt them. But if you shift that, like you were able to make it more like a data thing and another way to motivate yourself.
And I had no idea I had no plan. We also have information overload these days, I had the term I would use now is I had no expectations. I only read one book, and I just kept rereading that one book. I didn't have conflicting messages. I didn't know that people were arguing over how much starch someone should eat, or how much, or how many nuts and seeds someone can eat, or someone saying, don't have too much fruit, not enough fruit. Like I had none of that conflict going on. I just knew, eat more fruits, eat more vegetables, eat beans every day, and just do that. Right. So that was very helpful as well. And I had not seen, the only success stories I've seen were these very short, like a paragraph or less than a page of someone describing, oh, I did this and this is what happened. It wasn't so much as there wasn't a race. Like I didn't understand how long it took people, other people. I wasn't comparing myself to anyone else. So I really had no expectations. So it was a very peaceful journey for me in that regard, because I wasn't comparing myself to say, oh, well, Anthony lost 8 pounds a month. I only lost 4 pounds this month. I guess it's not working for me. I didn't have any of that kind of stuff, thankfully. But now we've got so much information and so much, with social media sharing, which can be very helpful and powerful, but it can also be, it can be psychologically more work to sort through and sift through.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you see one thing and you're like, oh, I love this doctor. He knows everything. And I'm going to follow this. And then two pictures down on Instagram will be a different doctor saying the complete opposite thing.
Conflicting,
so,
exactly.
People feel like, oh my gosh, what's the right answer? And you have to pick I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it should always be fruits and vegetables. I'm just going to say that. I'm not a doctor, but that's my answer.
I don't think anyone's going to argue with us on that one, right?
Right.
Everyone can agree. We eat lots of fruit, eat lots of vegetables,
Yeah.
Even beans. I think most people also agree with us on beans. And then other, if you just make that your core, it doesn't even have to be a lot of beans, a little bit of beans. And then whatever else you put around that stuff, fruits and vegetables and beans, you're fine.
Yeah. So you started off, you said, doing computer science. And now you're focused in more of a healthcare kind of realm, right? You want to tell us about that?
Sure.
And how you got there?
So it's an interesting progression as well. And again, I look back and I can tell a nice story, but of course it wasn't planned necessarily. Well, some steps of it were planned, but you're right. My education is in computer science, as I mentioned. I got my first job, and I say accidentally. I accidentally got my first job at the National Institutes of Health, working on the Human Genome Project.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why is because when I went to school in the early 90s, when I was in college, internet programming wasn't really a thing. Like we couldn't take a course on internet programming. We could take programming courses, and the internet was there starting to blossom. I remember when this was back when it was on a black screen with green letters, and that was my first experience using the World Wide Web, the internet as it is today. But so there were no pictures, there were no graphics, there was none of that stuff. My friends and I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world at the time. So we learned our computer, we took our classes during the day, and it was a combination of computer science and business is the program that I was in. Then after classes, we spent all our time in the computer labs figuring out how to make our programs work on the internet. And then shortly after, they came out with graphical web browsers. Then we could put pictures and change the colors of text and background information and, and all this stuff. We started writing programs that worked on the internet, and we were connecting them because we were in a business school and it was all data centric stuff. We learned how to connect them to databases. So then my one friend, he dropped out of college to take the job at the NIH on the Human Genome Project because they just needed people who knew how to do internet programming, and not a lot of people knew how to do it. Okay. So he was one of them. So he said, oh, well, I'm not going to go to school. I'm going to go make money. So then I graduated. I think I might have been a year ahead of him in the program or something. Anyway, and then we were having lunch one day. His name was Joe. And he said to me and my two friends, he said, hey guys, they're dying for people who know how to do what we do. Do you guys want to come work with me? And I had just graduated. I was like, yeah, sure. that sounds great. So that's how it kind of happened accidentally. But what happened when I got to NIH is I was there to do my computer work, but I started working with these scientists. And these scientists were dedicated to solving these problems around human health. And the passion that they had for their work, I mean, it was no longer like you kind of punch a clock and you come in, and then you punch a clock and you go home, and then you do stuff for fun, right? Like these guys were so excited about their work that their work and their lives were just completely intermingled between their work and their passions. And it was like they had this alignment going on in their careers where they were really excited about what they were doing every day. That was the first time I witnessed that. My father had a store. He had a deli, but he a deli and convenience store, and he was selling stuff. My mother was selling Mary Kay cosmetics. So they both enjoyed their work, but they weren't, necessarily passionate about solving these bigger problems, right? So I was exposed to that for the first time. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. So then I was excited. I worked there for 6 or 7 years, a little over 6 years, I think. During the time, I became pretty proud about, making my contribution. I got to present at all of these conferences and these Cold Spring Harbor laboratories. And, we got to travel around and share our work with other people who were fascinated by this. So, or into the genetics and genomics. And we were just sharing how we were making this data analysis happen, or how we were tracking this data, and how we were distributing this data over the internet to everyone who needed access to the data, and making these answers to these complex biological questions accessible to everyone. And I was proud of that. And then my wife, I was living in Bethesda, Maryland, working there on the NIH campus. My wife said, "Oh, we should move back to New Jersey." We were married now. We wanted to start a family. And I said, okay, there's no NIH back in New Jersey. So I started looking for other jobs. And I said, well, what do I want to do? I had kind of a niche experience with this genetics and this, this way of programming and doing this kind of informatics work. It was called bioinformatics at the time. The one thing that all of my colleagues at the NIH were kind of interested in was what happens, how do we actually help people with all of this information? I was like, oh, well, that's what pharmaceutical companies do. They take all of this information and they actually use it to make new drugs or therapies or treatments for disease. So I started talking to some people who I knew who were in pharmaceutical industry, and I switched. So in my mind at the time, I was like, oh, now I'm going to not only just help to discover how these things work and help people to better understand these biological functions, but now I'm going to help people who are actually doing something to correct these biological functions and to repair and to help people recover from disease. And so that's where my passion was. And again, it was from an informatics, from an area of contributing to informatics. It was exciting. And then I was at Novartis Pharmaceuticals for 17 years. I'm just doing math in my head. The first 5 of those years were Anthony at 360 pounds. 2 of those years were Anthony transitioning, to a whole food, plant-based, nutritarian diet, and healing myself and getting off of medications myself. And then the next, let's say 10 years of that time was wondering, why are we working so hard to come up with another pill to help someone with high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes, or all of these conditions that I knew could be helped so much with living a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet, exercise routines, stress management, sleep. So there was some conflict there. I was like, well, now I was in a position where I was less passionate about the contributions I was making during the day. And I was really excited to, after work, to go and share my personal story or help people to understand the power and potential of, plant-based nutrition and all this stuff. So my goal was to eventually, change careers. The problem was it was very hard to do. It's still hard to do. There was no easy path to replace the income I was making, especially going back 10 years ago. It's not like the world of what's called now lifestyle medicine using plant-based nutrition wasn't necessarily a thriving field. I think it's just starting to bud now, really. Wasn't going to be able to cover my bills and prepare for my kids, for paying for my kids' college and for doing all these things, if I just left my job right away. So So I slowly was figuring out what to do. And then in like 2017, my wife watched a documentary on minimalism. And then I watched it with her afterwards. And we both liked the idea of, if you free up space in your life by getting rid of stuff and things that you don't care that much about, then you actually open up like tons of opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
I was like, oh, well, that sounds cool. So at the time we were living in like a 4,000 plus square foot home on 6.5 acres of property. And we had a barn, and we had a garden, and we had a skateboard ramp, and we had a dirt bike trail through a field behind the house. We had the swing set, the tree fort, we had everything except the swimming pool. And she wanted a swimming pool at one point. But, and then I had a barn full of tools. I had a tractor, I had the weed whackers, the leaf blowers, the power washers, the truck, the spare truck to have, because I needed all this stuff to take care of all this other stuff, and it was, and I just, so watching that documentary and thinking about what we were doing and where did our, where did all of our money go to and stuff, you realize how narrow your potential opportunities are, because I felt like I was on these rails. Like I had to make X number of dollars a month to cover my, expenses and to support all the things, and also to be able to have money to do the things that we wanted to do, which would, travel and go on vacation and stuff. So anyway, we got rid of all of that stuff. So we got rid of the house, the property, everything we needed to take care of the house and the property. And we moved into this small condo, and we basically erased those rails or those train tracks that I had myself on, and no longer needed to, and no longer did either of us need to make a lot of money, or did we need to do these things. So I said, okay. So once we did that, I left Novartis in August of 2018. And I didn't really have a plan, but that was fine, because we were okay. Nice. With all the stuff that we had sold and everything, we had a little bit of breathing room, which was fantastic. So I went for a coaching certification, and I started coaching some patients one-on-one, or some clients one-on-one. And then I also had been working with Dr. Lori Marbas, and we were building some online education tools and stuff like that. And it wasn't really exciting me, partially because there were a lot of people who were out there doing a fantastic job of it already. So I kept just kind of exploring, and I was like, what's missing? What is our whole kind of plant-based world? What do we need? And what doesn't exist? I thought back to some of the conferences I would go to, and Plant Stock is actually the one that came to mind. I only went to one Plant Stock. It was the last one up on the Esselstyn's farm in New York.
Oh, very nice.
So I was there, but we had all of these incredible people, these doctors who would present, and they would always talk about their work and how they're helping people. And then they would share a patient testimonial or a couple patient testimonials, and they would talk about how they helped their patients recover from disease, and things like lupus, and certainly things like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and all of these things, right? And then someone in the audience would raise their hand, and they would say, my name is so-and-so, I'm suffering from a similar condition. Where can I find a doctor who can help me to change? And there's no answer.
Yeah.
Because there are a few of these doctors, and they were spread out, but they were hard to access. You either had to travel to go see them, which meant you could see them occasionally. You couldn't really legally do follow-up consultations if you weren't in the state where the doctor was licensed. And there was no way to really get ongoing medical care if someone needed a doctor over a 1 to 2 year period while they were transitioning and while they were healing and while they were working on all these conditions. It just didn't exist. So combining, again, my kind of informatics mind and my my ability to do computer science, and the technology, I started evaluating, what kind of platforms are out there for telemedicine. And I was talked to Dr. Marbas about it. And I would say, hey, we can do this. There's enough of this infrastructure and things exist where we could really build a lifestyle medicine, telemedicine company. And we could, it's still our mission, our tagline is to make lifestyle medicine available to everyone. Like, period. That's what the company is now called Plant-Based Telehealth. It took a while to come up with a name, but it sounds simple. But the mission of Plant-Based Telehealth is to make lifestyle medicine available to everyone. And that's it, period. And that lifestyle medicine is a pretty specific type of lifestyle medicine in that it's rooted in whole food, plant-based nutrition. Everyone who we're working with, all of the doctors, everyone understands that that's at the core of what needs to change. That's at the core of what's causing our illnesses, especially in our country. And that's a key component of it. So she told me I was crazy. She said she didn't use the word impossible, but she said it's too much work and stuff like that. But I was persistent, and she was also excited about it because she would think about it. So I don't know, it took a few months before we decided to really go for it. But the idea was always from day one that we needed to be with lifestyle medicine for everyone. We needed to have doctors who were licensed in all 50 states. We needed to have enough doctors so that they could see a lot of patients. And we knew that in doing that we would really build the knowledge base of these doctors who are working together now and seeing all these different patients, like hundreds of patients per month. And they're really going to understand, what works and how to be really effective. They're really going to really refine their methods on how they can help people. And that was one of the bigger picture parts of it. And then the other thing I want to do, and this is going to take more time, is I wanted to collect all the data so that we can kind of aggregate this and we can show how effective lifestyle medicine and specifically lifestyle telemedicine can be at reducing the strain on the healthcare system and really helping people to shift from treating disease towards preventing, or even reversing disease. So I know it's a long answer. Sorry. I just
no, that's fine.
I'm clearly excited about it.
Yeah.
And, so right now it's called Plant-Based Telehealth. We have 9 doctors. Do you mind if I read their names?
No, of course not.
Their names?
Yeah.
So we have, I'll just go in alphabetical order because that's how I have them here. So we have Dr. Nikki Davis, Dr. Elizabeth Fontaine, Dr. Michael Clapper, he's a name that's probably recognized. Everyone claps when
I know, love him.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Obviously, Dr. Lori Marbus, Dr. Christina Miller, Dr. Jeffrey Pierce, Dr. Kim Scheuer, Dr. Amy Zacharias, and Dr. Colin Zhu. And together they see patients in all 50 states. We're working now to make sure we have at least 2 doctors available in each state because that's going to reduce the wait times for some states. But and they're all working, they're all working different number of hours. But our goal is now with these 9 doctors to really get their schedules filled up so that we can, before we would expand much more beyond that. But we've reached that first milestone of really, so we have the whole entire country.
Wow.
They've reported that they've seen patients on the interior of Alaska. I see when the request comes through, there are patients from Kansas. I get to speak to some of the patients on the phone to help them with either technical problems or while they're scheduling their appointments. And everyone is so grateful to have access to a doctor who understands what they're trying to do because it's all, we're still a grassroots movement. Everyone is doing this for themselves. Everyone's making their decision to switch to a whole food plant-based diet. Everyone's making a decision to try to treat their conditions or improve their conditions in this somewhat non-traditional way. In the grand scheme, it's probably the most traditional way possible, but it's not the mainstream way, right?
Right.
So, but they're so grateful to have access. We have patients from South Dakota, and then they will also do international consultations. They can't prescribe medications and they can't order labs for anyone who's outside of the country, but they can do consultations with them. So they're even seeing patients from as far as Australia. and
Oh my gosh.
Dubai and the United Kingdom and everywhere.
That's so
So
cool.
it really is accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Oh man, that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just a little bit about how it works. So we're really trying to mimic an in-person like experience as much as possible.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is we have the medical history forms that patients fill out ahead of time. If a patient has any recent lab work, we want them to upload that into their patient portal, because then the doctor has a good picture of who the patient is, and they will review that even before the first appointment.
Okay.
And then patients get a full 30 minutes with their doctor.
Wow.
It's either 30 or 60-minute appointments, and all of that time is with the doctor. So they get a full 30 minutes with the doctor, or patients, if they want more time, they can book a 60-minute appointment. But either way, it's 100% of that time is there with the doctor. The doctor, it's done through a HIPAA compliant medical grade Zoom, through our patient portal. It's launched through the portal. So there, and I say that to say, the doctor and patient can see and speak with each other. They can also share screens if needed to go over blood work to really point out specific things.
Okay.
Beyond the appointment, we have a patient portal where patients can send messages back and forth to the doctor if they need to, as they need to follow up. If the patient does require a lab testing, we can set lab orders to Quest or LabCorp anywhere in the country.
Wow.
If a patient does require adjustments to medication, we're hoping that they're reducing medications, but they still need a new prescription to do that. The doctors can order prescriptions to any pharmacy in the country. So you just tell the doctor, and usually by the time you get off the appointment and drive to the pharmacy, it's there in a bag waiting for you. So it really does, these are full licensed medical appointments. It's almost like being in the same room, only that, it's done virtually. So there are some things that they won't be able to treat, but the doctors are very upfront about that. Anything that needs to be felt or listened to, obviously, if they need to put a stethoscope to hear someone's breathing in their lungs, they're going to send you to someone local. They're not going to be able to do those kinds of things. Or if you have a soreness and the doctor wants to be able to touch it and poke it to see, what's going on underneath the skin, they can't do those things over telemedicine.
Right. That is amazing though. And how lucky we are to have this option now. So thank you.
Thank you.
For that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Yeah. We're just trying to spread the word now. We just want everyone to know that we exist.
Yeah.
That's our first phase. We've been, Dr. Marbus saw the first patient in March of 2020. So we launched right with COVID, accidentally, not on purpose. We were trying to get it out about 4 months before that, but we just hit a few hurdles along the way. And so it's been about 18 months now since they've been seeing patients. And like I said, it's growing. We started with just the one doctor in, I think, 13 states, and now there's 9 doctors and all 50 states are covered. And now we just want to make sure that everyone in the plant-based community and even the vegan community knows that they have access to a doctor who understands what they're trying to do with lifestyle. And then we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're really going to try to go after, I call them go after disease areas. So we're really going to go after, we're just going to look for people who have hypertension and tell them, hey, did you know that you can treat this with lifestyle? Go after people with type 2 diabetes, things like that.
That's awesome. And so important and needed.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So now we have an answer for that person, that plant stock who raises their hand. Where can I find a doctor who can help me to change my lifestyle? Like the answers, it applies to everyone. It doesn't matter where you are. If you just go to plant-based telehealth, you can find a doctor who can help you.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. I know for me, even going to the doctor, how many times, because I've been vegetarian for 20 years and vegan for like 6 years now. Anytime, the doctor will ask, oh, what are you eating or whatever, and I'll tell them, and they're like, hummus. Oh, that's not, yes, exactly, just hummus. They're like, well, but they don't understand. And they're like, what do you mean you don't eat like any animals at all? Like, it's just a fad, don't worry about it, like you'll get over it. Or I can't tell you how many doctors just didn't understand, didn't want to understand. And but it's to have that option.
I do understand that. And for someone with a very strong conviction like yourself, who knows what you're going to do, right? I don't think anyone's going to rock you off your boat, right?
Right.
But so for you, it's maybe just slightly annoying to hear the doctor say that, but it doesn't really sway you. But to
Right,
someone
that's
who's
true.
a little bit, for someone who's a little bit unsure, or someone who's new, it's sad to me when someone puts themselves on such a high potential path, and then they get disrupted because they're asked a couple of questions like, well, where are you going to get your calcium? Or, are you going to get enough protein like that?
Mm-hmm.
And if that turns anyone around and makes people think that this isn't right, or that this isn't going to be able to do it without even having them given it a try, like that, that kind of makes me sad. So that's where we really are a good match for people, so that you can have a doctor who understands what you're doing with your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who are really sick, and there are people who are sick even though they've switched to a whole food plant-based diet, and they still haven't gotten the results that they want. And a lot of times they just need a more prescriptive plan.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they need to identify some food sensitivities that are causing some kind of flare-ups or something, because individuals are, there might be some responses that some people have to some foods that other people don't and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And these doctors are fantastic at helping to do that kind of next level of fine tuning.
So
and then
cool.
There are also then the last people are the, what I call the healthy vegans, or the healthy
Mm-hmm.
whole food plant-based. They don't have any medical conditions, but when they go to the doctor, they don't want to be told, oh, you don't need any medication, go home, right? They want to be told, oh, hey, your cholesterol has been around, 150, and I just noticed it went up to 170. Do you know that keeping it down around 150 actually dramatically reduces your chance of ever having a cardiovascular condition, right? Mm-hmm. Where in a traditional medical practice, they're probably just waiting until your cholesterol hits, 200 or 210 or 220, so that they can write the script, right? But these doctors know how to focus on optimal wellness. So even though you're healthy, you can go get your blood work done once a year, once every 2 years, 3 years. It doesn't matter how often you would go, but when you go, it's going to be looked at with a lens of optimal wellness. Like, how can we make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure that you stay healthy as long as possible, right? Which is a lot to ask in a traditional medical environment, where you only have a few minutes with the doctor, and their toolkit is really the prescription pad, not really the lifestyle pad. So so we're seeing all kinds of patients like that.
Mm-hmm. It is a significant difference. I was just thinking, as you were talking about my dad, who in early 2000s, he had a heart attack and had a quadruple bypass. And then, he really started to take care of himself. He lost weight. He was more active. And then he slowly kind of started going back to life as he always knew it. And he gained weight again. And then the next time he went to his cardio doctor, the doctor was just like, yeah, okay, your number, like, ran blood, your numbers are okay. And then when my dad got home, I said to him, he didn't say anything about you gaining weight. Like, you just had a quadruple bypass a couple of years ago. And he was like, no, he said, I'm good. No, I'm
probably
sure there were things.
And it's really just because he probably didn't reach some threshold,
right,
that kicks a plan into action, right? Like, I know the cholesterol threshold because I danced along it for so long, but it was like 210, 215, I could convince them not to give me drugs, right? But if I was 225 or if I was 230, I'm sure that they were going to be insisting, right? And the same thing happened with my blood pressure. It was in like the 130s over 90 something, 89 for the longest time, and I was able to convince them. But when it went up to when the high 140s over like the high 90s, they said no. They just wait. Once you reach that threshold, they know exactly what to do. They can kick in the plan, right?
Yeah.
But
you hit a certain level of sick, and they're like, now is time we do this thing. Yeah.
But if you take someone who doesn't even believe that diet and lifestyle is a contributing factor, then they're like, what are they going to do when your cholesterol gets up to 210, 205?
Right.
They're not going to say to eat differently because they don't even believe that it's caused by what you eat. right?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna say, oh no, it doesn't matter what you eat. We just have to wait until it hits 210 and then I'll write you your script.
Right.
Or whatever the
Oh,
number
gosh.
is. I'm not a doctor, so I'm just saying.
Right.
But
These are
these are
arbitrary
where
numbers.
these are where I understand these numbers are, and the example, you're exactly right. The example holds true. Yeah.
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 My final question for you
Sure.
is, what's your favorite way to eat hummus?
Okay. So I have it. So I eat hummus a lot, and my normal way to eat hummus is just to put a pile of it on top of my salad, and to drizzle some balsamic vinegar over the whole thing.
Oh, very nice.
Then, because then I don't need any dressing or anything, and that's how I most often eat hummus. But my favorite way to eat hummus is my friend. His name is Josh DeKellis. He has a restaurant in the Clinton area. It's in Annandale. It's called Juniper Hill.
Okay.
And he opened this restaurant. Now, Josh has opened and sold a bunch of restaurants. He's worked all over the world, right? He's was a New York Times rising star, top rising chef or something like that. I don't know. He's did the Iron Chef and all of those things, Martha Stewart, everything, right? So I don't know.
Very impressive.
But I think very highly of him as a chef. He came back here, and I know him from growing up in this area in Clinton, New Jersey. And he came back here and he was opening the restaurant. And he said, I want to make sure I have food for you, because he knows what I'm doing and stuff. So that's fantastic. So we do these plants on plates dinners, and we were doing them monthly as well before COVID, but we need to get back to those also. But now it's not COVID is a problem, it's his staff. He's just, every place is tight on staff, so he can't do extra things. But I'm getting to an answer, I promise. I'm not going to drag this out too long. But the plants on plates dinners are as pure as you could be, right? I don't allow him, there's no flour, there's no sweeteners of any kind other than whole fruit, which would be dates or raisins would be the most, kind of thing towards a sweetener. There is obviously no meat or dairy, there's no oil, and there's very little salt on plants on plates meals. But then he also has vegan items on the regular menu. And then sometimes he sends out vegan items when we're there. And so coming back to the hummus, the one time I was there, he sent out this thing. It looked like a pizza, right? He actually makes like I think it's a charcoal grill or a wood grilled pizza, and it's a very thin crust, and it's all fresh homemade. I mean, it's a really nice restaurant, and then it had all of these like raw vegetables on top of it, and it was like shredded, like ribboned, I think, carrots. It wasn't like shredded like toothpick shaped carrots. It was like flat, it was like did it with a peeler, so it was like, so anyway, there were like ribbons of carrots and ribbons of and maybe some cucumber, I don't know what was in it, like those kinds of vegetables on top. So he brings out this thing that looks like a pizza with this stuff on it, but it didn't have tomato sauce, obviously it didn't have any cheese, but it had a layer of hummus. So it was this fresh bread with this layer of hummus, and then these raw vegetables kind of piled up on top of it. And the raw vegetables either had some lime juice or a little bit of vinegar, so there was a little bit of tang. And then he literally sliced it like a pizza. So it was like hummus with fresh bread and fresh vegetables, and a hummus pizza, I think is what, I don't know what else to call it.
That sounds amazing. I'll be making my way over there.
Amazing. Yeah. It is amazing. So, and you can make it at home, like when we do stuff like that at home, we would just cut up, the normal vegetables that I would eat hummus with, right? Carrots or bell peppers, or cucumbers and stuff like that. Like you can just cut that stuff up. And sometimes we will get like a whole wheat tortilla shell, right? So it's super thin, and just put that in the oven, and then take it out, and then put the hummus on it, and then put some shredded vegetables on top of it. And then instead of using the hummus as a dip, it's like that kind of layer in between.
That sounds amazing.
So there you go. That's my favorite way. That's my favorite way to enjoy hummus.
I love it.
It's not my normal. I don't do that all the time. Certainly with the pizza dough, I wouldn't want to have that every single day. But once in a while as a special treat, it's really outstanding.
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna make a note of that. I'll be making that sometime soon. Yes, thank you. All right. Well, Anthony, this was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your new venture, plant-based telehealth.
Thank
We are
you.
very lucky that you are doing this. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed talking with you. I felt like I talked a little bit too much, but thank you for tolerating it. And it was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, people won't get to see all the smiles that we've had and all the,
They'll hear it,
our
though.
laughter. Yeah, exactly. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on. It was really, really nice.
Thank you. How are you feeling after that inspiring talk? Two of my takeaways were around Anthony's attitude toward making that change in the first place. He didn't have a hard line on what plant foods he wouldn't eat, like a vegan pizza. His focus was on eating more fruits and vegetables at first, crowding out all of the other stuff. Then, when he talked about during the process, as he was healing himself, I asked, "Did you have a hard time?" And he said no. And it was because he didn't question if he could do it, because he wasn't in a race or comparing himself with anyone else. How inspiring. What could we accomplish if we stopped looking at what others are doing and focused solely on what we are doing in the moment right now? What were your takeaways? I'd love to hear about them. Send me a message on Instagram or Facebook, an email. You know I'll share the information here at the end. Think about it and shoot me a message. Check out Plant-Based Telehealth at plantbasedtelehealth.com. You can follow Anthony on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All of his links will be in the show notes, of course. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. I've launched a test version of my 8-week vegan voyage course later this month. Since it's the first ever run, I'm offering a significant difference in price. The course will include live group calls with me once a week, some homework, I love homework, discussions in a private Facebook group for those enrolled, and you'll also have daily access to me. So if you're interested, you can visit my website and click on the Vegan Voyage tab. Of course, the link for this will also be in the show notes. I also have created, I'm announcing it here on the podcast, I created a private group for fans of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. So if you love the show and you want to start interacting with other people who love the show, join the private Facebook group. We'll have all kinds of conversations. I'll be there. We'll talk about the episodes. What did you think about them? What kind of episodes would you like to hear? We'll just talk about going vegan, being vegan, just hanging out in a safe space where, we're just going to be there to support each other as we transition to veganism or as we are vegans and we want to talk about stuff. It's all there. For fans of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast, you now have a place to meet. So you can find that on Facebook, Did You Bring the Hummus podcast group, link in the show notes. Definitely check it out. I'd love to have you there. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus. Visit my website at didyouBringTheHummus.com for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. I would love to hear from you. What do you need help with? Is there a topic you want to hear covered on a future episode? DM me on Instagram or send me an email at didyouBringTheHummus@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.